Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam satu Malaysia. Saudara Farquhar Hakini, Chairman of UKEC, distinguished speakers, UKEC committee members, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate UKEC and the organizing committee of the 5th Annual Malaysian Students Leaders Summit 2011 with the team piecing together the Malaysian puzzle. It gives me great pleasure to be given the opportunity to speak to all of you today and to be given the honor to officially close MSLS 2011. As I ponder the theme of this year's summit, piecing together the Malaysian puzzle, it sounds to me like an enigma when you talk about the Malaysian puzzle. But trying to piece together the Malaysian puzzle and what we have today, it would be worthwhile for us to reflect on the genesis of the Malaysian story. Where did it all begin? I do not want this to be a history lesson, but I'd like to take all of you back to the time when our forefathers, or more precisely our founding fathers of modern Malaysia, decided on a number of fundamental decisions that shaped the destiny and the fate of Malaysia. One of the most fundamental and far-reaching decision made by our founding fathers was to accept integration as the way forward for our new country. If you recollect, that must have been a very difficult decision to make because the other countries in the region decided to go for assimilation instead of integration. Therein lies the wisdom that we've always advocated a sense of moderation, if you like, a sense of accommodation between the various ethnic groups in this country, to find solutions that are acceptable without resorting to confrontational stance, without resorting to views that are too extreme. When we decided on integration, we gave birth to a very unique country, because Malaysia today is a kaleidoscope of so many ethnic and sub-ethnic groups. You know the situation in Semenanjung, in Sarawak. You have more than 40 ethnic and sub-ethnic groups. Dato' Idris Jala, for example, comes from the Kelabit group of only 5,000 strong. And you have about 30 over in Sabah. But Malaysia, when we adopted the policy of integration, makes us very unique because we can leverage on the strength of each ethnic group. We decided on allowing vernacular education in Malaysia. No other country in Southeast Asia has allowed for it. We might have challenges because we have different streams, but we also have the added advantage of people being able to speak good Mandarin and the other languages. And in today's context of a rising China, we have found that to be useful because it allows us to have greater connection with China as a rising economic power. We are united in the sense of being Malaysian, although we have different names. In Indonesia and in Thailand, it's a hard job to find out their ethnic background because they all have Thai or Indonesian names. They all speak Bahasa and Thai, and you can't detect the accent. But here in Malaysia, you have people who speak Bahasa, but people who don't speak Bahasa in a proper sense, but they still get by, and we still accommodate them. And that is where we are today. That is the interesting cultural milieu that we have in Malaysia. And that is why when I took over a couple of years ago, I decided to continue what my predecessors have done by looking at how we can strengthen this process of nationhood and nation building. I decided it was time that we have a guiding philosophy. And the guiding philosophy is called One Malaysia. And added on to that, people first. Because in a parliamentary democracy, it's all about people. And then I thought it's also good to emphasize on performance. Because I'm a great believer in performance, performance-based management and leadership. One Malaysia is our guiding principle to unite this country. One Malaysia also talks about changing the mindset. I've said this before. I believe that it is a journey. And the very most minimum position is one of tolerance. But being mere tolerant of one another doesn't bode well. Because if you tolerate the person who sits next to you in this room, for example, it doesn't mean you like the person. You just bear with the person. But then there is the other next stage, if you like, which is total acceptance. If you accept in total the differences that we have in this country, then you are comfortable with the diversity that we enjoy in this country. Then ultimately, there is another level, a higher level, and that is one of celebrating our diversity. If we can celebrate our diversity, it means that we can leverage on the strength of the Malays, the strength of the Chinese, the Indians, the Ibans, the Kadazans, the Orang Aslis, and together, as one nation, we can move forward with greater strength. I believe that collectively, if we use the best of the Malays, Chinese, Indians, Kadazan, Iban, will be far greater than the sum of the individual. And of course, this is a journey. You can, in your experience, discover things which may not necessarily to your liking, may not conform with your understanding of what One Malaysia is all about. I don't pretend that everything is perfect. There are people with racist views. There are people with extreme views. But so are there people with extreme views in Norway, extreme views in America. What about the preacher who wanted to burn the Quran in America? You have many, many examples of that. But as a concept, it is also something that is work in progress. It is a journey. And as you know, before we reach the final destination, and that being we celebrate diversity in the fullest sense of the word, we can transform the mindset of our people. And hopefully, as we go along, as part of this transformation journey, people will become more and more comfortable with the whole concept and notion of One Malaysia. One Malaysia doesn't mean we've abandoned the fundamentals in the Constitution. The Constitution is there, and we have to respect the Constitution. What we are trying to do is to ensure there's fairness in our society. There is the whole notion of social justice as well. And to be fair to all, it depends on one's interpretation of being fair to all. I like to say that being fair to all means you have to take account the environment and the background of the individual concerned. And if you want to compete on a level playing field, you must allow for some degree of fairness in that competition. For example, last year when we gave out the JPA scholarship, we decided that those who have all 9 A+ and above, irrespective of ethnic group, will get a JPA scholarship, whether overseas or in the country. And that is a landmark decision because we've never done that before. That was the first time in our history we've taken that position, that those with 9 A+ for all subjects on the basis of merit will get a JPA scholarship. And this year we've done even better. We've gone down to 8 A+. Those with 8 A+ will get a JPA scholarship, whether abroad or in the country, but a JPA scholarship they will get. But if we were to accept the principles of a pure meritocracy society, then what about those people in the outlying areas? Those people who live in long houses, those people who live in the very rural areas, what chance do they have? So we decided that our policy should be on the basis of trying to marry meritocracy as well as social justice. So those with 8 A+ will be strictly on merit. But there will be a category for socio-economic considerations that will benefit the Ibans, benefit the Kadazan, benefit the Indians, and benefit the Malays, particularly in the rural areas as well. For example, if you are born and bred in Kenny Hills, for example, or somewhere around Hilton Hotel, surely you have much better advantage than somebody born in a longhouse. There is a longhouse in Sarawak, a place called Ulu Lachau. I have to pronounce it very carefully, in case I make a mistake. It's Ulu Lachau. Try to go to that longhouse in Ulu Lachau and try to imagine you are born in that longhouse. Without some degree of accommodation or affirmative action, if you like, what chance would that person have to move up the ladder, to be part of the social mobility in this country? Or if you like, another example is a place in Jerantut, Ulu Tembeling. There is a kampong called Kampong Bantal, Ulu Tembeling. And there's a kampong called Kampong Pagi. You move up the river in a small boat. When you reach that kampong, Kampong Bantal, you're so tired, they give you bantal and you sleep. So that's why it's called Kampong Bantal. And the next day you reach this kampong, it's next morning, it's called Kampong Pagi. Imagine if you're born in Kampong Pagi or Kampong Bantal. What chance do you have to move up the social ladder compared if you're born in Damansara or Pantai Hills, or anywhere in Klang Valley for that matter? So in Malaysia, we try to put together policies that we consider to be based on the principle of social justice, so that everyone has a share. And even if you do not get a JPA scholarship for that matter, there are other bodies giving up scholarships. There's also the PTPTN loan that we give out to students. We give out a lot of loan. The repayment is something else. The government doesn't get paid back as much as the amount we give away. But we are proud of this. We are proud of a system in Malaysia that allows for massive social mobility. And if you look at the people around today who are successful, no matter what their social background, ethnic background is, just in one generation, I know someone who was living in quarters provided as a driver. And today, he's rich enough to buy the entire property, because as a son of a driver, that person has done well, because we've allowed for social mobility in this country. I do not want to make comparisons with other countries, because I see in our midst there are some foreigners too. But I think if you're born in Harlem or Bronx, the chances of you growing up may be very, very slim in the United States society. And in Britain, remember Margaret Thatcher? She was born as a daughter of a small grocer in Lincolnshire. And what did she do? She changed her accent from Lincolnshire accent to speak the Queen's English, because she wanted to get to Oxbridge. In UK, there is a subtle form of division based on your accent. Nobody says there is a class society, but it's a subtle class society. In Malaysia, We are proud of the fact that there is enormous social mobility, and we can do even better in the future as we improve the quality or access to quality education in this country. So we have lots of good things going for us, but we mustn't rest on our laurels. When we assessed the situation 2 years ago, we thought that we were in a so-called middle income trap. We were doing well, but we face a different milieu. There are many countries, emerging countries, even the so-called communist countries, have all intents and purposes become very capitalistic, free market economies. The only difference is that they've kept the edifice, the communist edifice, but everything else has become very capitalistic. They are in a game to attract foreign direct investment. Our share of foreign direct investment was coming down. We were not moving up the value chain. We were attracting low or other investment using low income type of industries, low productivity. They over-reliant on foreign labor. We become quite addicted to cheap foreign labor. We were not innovating fast enough, and we were losing our competitive edge. So what we needed to do was to have, in short, a new economic model. And I don't want to go into too much into this because I know you have listened to the presentation on our new economic model. But I'd just like to talk to you about how it came about. It came about because we thought that if we didn't do and introduce a game changer, we will not achieve our vision of becoming a fully developed nation by the year 2020. We needed to spell out what Vision 2020 meant in specific terms. I believe that if you have specific targets, you're likely to be more focused. And because if you're more focused, you're likely to achieve it. So we decided, how do we define this notion of a fully developed nation? Then we came up with the idea that it should be based on income per head. And we decided from 7,000 to 15,000, doubling our income per head would be the way to achieve fully developed nation status. Well, that was the easy part. The what part was the easy part. The how part was the more challenging. The how part is the part that is based on our economic transformation program. If we are able to grow at 6% per year, with a level of investment of $444 billion over 10 years, creating 3.3 million jobs, we will become a fully developed nation by the year 2020. That is our transformation journey. And that is what we're doing for all of you. Because by providing jobs, high-paying jobs, we are preparing the future for all of you in this room. We are preparing a future that is more exciting. And I believe that our job doesn't end with just the economic transformation program. We also believe that Malaysia is a society in transition. We come from different generations. As I stand before you, I suddenly realize my age. I was young once before, but that was many years ago. But people of my generation have a slightly different notion of nationhood. We came from the period when lots of things could have gone wrong with Malaysia. We could succumb to racial strife and conflict. Don't forget, Bosnia happened in the heart of Europe not too long ago, in what's supposed to be a matured civilization. But even in a matured civilization, there was ethnic cleansing. We are fortunate in Malaysia that lots of things that could have gone wrong didn't go wrong. Or it went wrong for a while, we put it right. I can still remember the tragic events of 13th May 1969, although at that time I was a schoolboy. And at that time, one of the things that perplexed me was my late father was the director of operations at that time. And as director of operations, he had enormous powers. He had the powers of the cabinet, or the executive, and the powers of parliament rolled into one person. Can you imagine that? There was no cabinet, there was no parliament, there was just Tun Razak as director of operations. It was a dream, in a sense. That why should you bother about parliament? Why should you bother about a cabinet? One man rule was good enough for the country. But I remember talking to him, and he kept on telling me, I am afraid of the powers that I have. And at that time, perhaps I found it hard to comprehend what he meant. And he said, I can't wait for the time to return the powers back to the people through parliament, through parliamentary democracy. Do you know that was way back in 1970, 71? It was not fashionable at that time to surrender your powers. It was more fashionable at that time to try to garner more power for yourself. It was almost unheard of. Can you imagine how many leaders at that time would have done that? Find the earliest possible opportunity, surrender back the enormous, awesome powers you have back to the people through parliamentary democracy. But we did that. As soon as we recovered from the 13th May incident, as soon as things were stable, Tun Razak gave back the powers to parliament. He called for elections. That is one thing I'd like to stress. We've been a great believer of parliamentary democracy in this country from day one, and will continue to believe in parliamentary democracy. We may have our shortcomings here and there. You may be comparing democracy in UK or in America. But nobody disputes the fact that there is democracy in Malaysia, and you can overthrow the government in Malaysia if you wish to. I hope you don't wish to. But if you wish to, you can. And we have lost elections before. We've lost elections in Kelantan. Until today, Kelantan is in the rule of the opposition, the hands of opposition for 21 years. We've lost in Terengganu, we've lost in Sabah for 10 years. We lost 5 states the last general election. And let me tell you, the past government that was ruling Kelantan after the general elections of 2004, we won Pangkalan Pasir in a by-election. And they were hanging on to the state government with a majority of just 1 seat. And that seat was based on a constituency called Pulai Condong, which they won with a majority of 2. Now, if you think, if you think that we can manipulate the ballot box, don't you think we could have found 3 votes? It's not difficult to find 3 votes. I'm not talking about 30 votes. 300 or 3,000 votes. I'm talking about 3 votes, a mere 3 votes. Don't you think we could have found 3 votes? If we can manipulate the ballot box. If SPR is not objective, surely we can do that. But we didn't do it. We allowed a majority with 2 votes to win. And that was the government that was in power in Kelantan with a majority of 1 for about 2 years. And we didn't do anything to disturb that government. We allowed that government to proceed, even with a majority of 1. So I like to refute very strongly if people believe that there is no parliamentary democracy in Malaysia. There is parliamentary democracy. We can debate about the notion of a fair election, or rather a notion of a free election, but a fair election, yes, there is fair election. You shouldn't doubt that. You know, people get nervous when it comes to election. Even ministers get nervous. You must allow for room for dissent, yes. That's why we made an offer for the stadium. They could have used the stadium, but unfortunately that offer was not accepted. They insisted on still walking through the streets and using the National Stadium. I had in mind the Shah Alam Stadium, because they said they were going to get about 100,000 people. So Shah Alam Stadium was the best option. It's away from the general public. There will be no threat to the lives or properties of people living. But if you walk through town, there's always a chance of something happening. But if you want to make a statement, we are prepared to discuss changes, improvement to the electoral system. That's another point that I like to debunk, that we are not interested in clean and fair election. That is not true. We are going to improve the system. We are going to introduce the biometric system. When we said this is the best, most modern system, then others will say, oh, we want to go back to the indelible ink. If we introduce the indelible ink, they say, oh, that is out of date. You should have tried a new system. We always seem to be at a losing end, you know. When we try to improve something, there's always some objection to it. But never mind, probably that is politics. We have to live with it. But do not doubt our commitment to improve the system. Even the so-called postal votes, there's no such thing as postal votes. There are votes, earlier votes, because there are people on duty, and members of the opposition are also there to watch people voting. They are there to see the votes being done. The people go into the ballot box and they actually vote on their own. It's not somebody who takes their ballot boxes and vote on their behalf. It doesn't happen. Maybe the nomenclature of postal votes, we should do away with that. You know, we could introduce something else, but it's not postal votes. Soldiers can vote. They are our citizens. And let me tell you, there are times when, from a particular camp, we have lost. Majority have gone for the opposition. I know where the camps where we have lost. It's not automatic that just because they are soldiers or because they're policemen, we lose. No. Never think that is the case. So there is this situation that we are in today. We are trying to make it better and better. And I hope with the young people, with all of you, so many young faces here, that you will be part of this journey to make Malaysia better and better. Just be understanding the issues and challenges, fine, that's a good starting point, but that's not enough. I want you to stand up. I want you to be counted. I want you to be part of this journey to make Malaysia better and better, and believe that we can, and it's my duty and duty of my colleagues to make sure that we make Malaysia a country that you can be proud of, and the time when you come to the fore, Malaysia will be God willing, a fully developed nation. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.